strange stories coming out of North Korea. We continue talking about the East China Sea and also what it's like being a longtime resident in Japan. All these stories and more, the QiRanger Podcast starts now. Greetings and salutations, my excellent friends. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Steve Miller, the internet's QiRanger, and this, of course, is the QiRanger Podcast, and I would like to thank you for joining me this week on the show. Now, I really don't have any announcements, but I will let you know that next week is the last episode of the season because, well, the school year is just about done, and come the end of December, Joe and I will be departing Korea for a wonderful month-long vacation in Southeast Asia. So while there won't be any videos on the main QiRanger channel during that time, I will be posting as often as possible to social media and, of course, the daily vlog channel. So if you want to see a little bit of Southeast Asia as it happens, make sure you're subscribed to my social media links and, of course, the QiRanger vlog channel. All right, that's it for that part of the show. Let's get started with the news. Welcome back to the show, everyone. As we do every week, we lead off with stories from the Koreas, and this is a very interesting story. It's breaking as I record the podcast. There's not a lot of details coming out, but it is something I want to talk about. Now, Chang Song-taek may have been removed from his position in North Korea. Now, this is the uncle of Kim Jong-un, whose wife was, I believe, the sister of Kim Jong-il. Now, this is an important story for a number of reasons. Now, first of all, like I said, there's a lot of sketchy details about it, but he was thought to be the person in control, or at least as an advisor to Kim Jong-un when he first rose to power a year ago, a little over a year ago, rather. And the information broke during a NIS, National Intelligence Service meeting with Korean lawmakers. And it wasn't clear whether or not that information was supposed to be made public, but it was. And it said that Chung was removed from office and his two aides were actually publicly executed for bribery or corruption charges. Now, a couple of reasons why this is very interesting and why I'm following it is, if you remember, a little over a year ago, there was a first report that there was an assassination attempt on Kim Jong-un. And some of those reports, and even though the assassination attempt, even in November of last year and earlier this year, it was always thought that Chung may have been part of that group that was carrying out those attacks. Anyway, it's very interesting that he is the one that now has been removed from power, or at least has been alleged to be removed from power. In fact, he hasn't been seen in public, and his wife hasn't been seen in public for some time. So, this could be a sign that there's still trouble within the Kim leadership, and we'll just have to watch things as they unfold. If this is true, it could really show a sign that there are some upheavals in the process taking place inside North Korea. All right, coming back to South Korea, there are some additional charges being levied against the National Intelligence Survey chief. Won Se-hun, who headed Korea's NIS last year, is now facing multiple charges for allegedly meddling in the 2012 Korean presidential election. Now, I think levying charges against him is a step in the right direction, but still, no one seems to be addressing what I think is the larger issue, and that's having a government organization try to carry out a smear campaign against another candidate. It's one thing if parties or individuals try to smear another candidate. That's just politics, unfortunately. But when a government organization does it, I think that's time to step up and say, no, this is a bad call for democracy. And whether or not that makes the election void. In my opinion, I think that is a valid question to ask. If the NIS tried to do something, it doesn't matter whether or not it was effective, but the simple fact that they may have tried to skew the election for one candidate or the other is grounds to say possibly we need to have another election. So we'll see what happens as this story develops as well. I would love to hear your thoughts on the matter. If a government organization does something to try, doesn't matter if it's effective, but if it tries to influence public opinion, does that mean that the election is void? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. All right, going back to North Korea. North Korea's Yongbyon reactor may be back in action. The IAEA has confirmed through satellite imagery that the North Korean reactor is in the process of restarting. Now, this doesn't come as a surprise to anyone. North Korea has said many times that it's going to resume its nuclear program, but I think this has implications on a wider scale, namely the six-party talks. Again, North Korea is showing no signs that it's going to give up its program. So South Korea, Japan, and the United States setting that as a precondition for talks just shows that nothing's going to happen, and that the West really hasn't done anything to try and understand what North Korea needs or wants to get rid of the nuclear program. And in fact, I'm not sure it will ever get rid of the program. And fundamentally, this is the problem with the talks. The West is hell-bent on getting North Korea to cease and desist nuclear development. North Korea is on the polar opposite of that. So as long as that's where everybody remains, nothing's ever going to change. You need to find the middle ground and find a way that will entice North Korea to cease operations. That's the only way anything's ever going to happen. And finally, from the Koreas, let's talk about Merrill Newman. Now, he is the 85-year-old American who was detained about a month ago in North Korea following a trip there. And he finally did make a public statement over the last weekend. And basically, he said in a prepared statement, "During the Korean War, I have been guilty of a long list of indelible crimes against DPRK government and Korean people as advisor to the Kuwol unit of the UN Korea 6th Partisan Regiment, part of the Intelligence Bureau of the Far East Command." Now, there's more to the statement. It's about maybe 4 pages, 3.5 pages handwritten. And of course, you can get all the information at the show notes. Now, of course, this is something that is very evident that he was coerced to write. Whether or not how much input the North Korean government had in actually crafting the words, or if they actually wrote it, don't know his handwriting. I just saw the pictures that it was a handwritten note. Now, why was he detained? Well, I think a number of reasons. Most likely is that Kenneth Bae hasn't really proved to be a good source of interaction and source of concessions from the United States for North Korea. And I think having an 85-year-old former Korean war vet as essentially a hostage, maybe Kim thinks that he's going to get something from the United States, at least another high-level visit, as is typically the case. You saw what happened when the journalists were detained, 5 years ago now? So I wouldn't be surprised if a former president, or at least a state-level person, State Department level person, maybe even the Secretary of State, visits North Korea to try and secure his release. So we'll see what happens with that. There's still a lot of details that are missing from this story, and we'll just have to see what happens in the long run. All right, moving on to East Asian news, let's talk about the ADIZ. Now, currently, we still have the three parties at work here. We have China, we have Japan, and we have South Korea trying to figure out what to do with this zone. China unilaterally put out the zone a little over a week ago. Everyone in the region pretty much said we don't recognize it, and they're playing a huge pissing match right now, trying to see where the lines really are and who's going to blink first. All three nations, well, I guess all four nations if you include the United States, since they have flown planes in the region as well, are continuing to say Well, I would say let's break that down. So you have Korea, Japan, United States saying that they don't acknowledge the zone and they're not going to do anything in terms of notifying China if they fly military aircraft in the zone. Japan has ordered its flag carriers not to notify China. The United States will allow its carriers to notify China. I'm not really sure what Korea is going to do. I think they're still talking about that. Anyway, Korea is set to redraw its lines to further overlap with China, and Japan is probably going to bear the brunt of this. Now, China has come out and said that China has no beef with South Korea, so if, as expected, South Korea redraws its lines to include the Edo area that's disputed between China and South Korea, I don't really think China is going to do much with South Korea if South Korean Air Force jets or naval vessels, go into that area. China has come out and said that pretty blatantly and brazenly that the ADIZ is meant to deal with Japan. And that's probably going to really affect how things play out because it's really centering around the Senkaku Daio island area. Now, the United States has said that in any kind of conflict, they will back Japan and South Korea because of treaty obligations. And that could just really get out of hand really quickly. And again, this is why I say, in terms of what I am most concerned about safety-wise and in terms of conflict-wise, it's not North-South Korea relations, it's this East Asia relations. That's what has me worried. And another story which I thought was interesting from Japan that really made me sit back and think, what the hell? A switched at birth story. So a Tokyo man was recently awarded 32 million yen by a social welfare company that operated the hospital where he was born. The courts found that the company was negligent when the hospital staff mixed up the man with another child born 13 minutes later. He went into the home of someone who was dependent on welfare, while the other child went on to lead a life of luxury. The mix-up was only uncovered after the man's biological parents died, and his biological siblings realized that their quote-unquote brother didn't look like him. Now, what you have to realize is that this took place 60 years ago, and I really struggled to wonder, okay, so you've had this quote-unquote brother for 60 years and you never realized that he didn't look the same? I mean, I can understand not wanting to upset your parents to some degree, that, hey, is this really our brother? But to do it only after the fact and after, you're going through the will, I just question what really happened here. Because even if he's not biologically your brother, you grew up with this person. He is your brother in every other sense of the word. And I have to give credit to the court system for fining the welfare hospital, because that is what should have been done. I mean, you mixed up, this person led a decidedly different life over what they would have had. So yeah, I think that's a very interesting story, but I just don't understand how, even as a parent, you have a child for 60 years and you wonder, gosh, he doesn't look like me. And that'd be and also very other interesting aspect of the story. Did the parents realize this before they passed away? All right, and one final story from the news, and this goes back to a lot of the confrontation and attitudes here in East Asia, and this is coming from China. And it was a really interesting op-ed, or at least an opinion piece, in the China Daily. And if you want to know more about the conflict between China and Japan and why China is so adamant about protecting itself and having this ADIZ, and why they're so, I guess, what's a good word? Why they're so have such hostility towards Japan, it really goes back to this story that ran about reflections on the 70-year anniversary of the Cairo Declaration. And a lot of that stemmed from Japan's incursion to China and what was supposed to happen after World War II that China feels didn't. And I think it's a good read in terms of anyone who wants to have more background on the area. So that will be it for this week's news. As always, you can find links to all the stories in the show notes over at QiRanger.com. This week on Take Me Away, I'm sitting down with Jim Mullins, a longtime expat living in Japan. And this week he's going to share with us what he likes and what he doesn't like about living in the land of the rising sun. Just take me away. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. And this week we are joined, like I said, by Jim Mullins. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be here this evening.
Now, for those of you who may not know, my friend Jim has been living in Japan for a long time. What, 20 years now?
It'll be 23 years in February.
23 years in February. So, if you don't know Jim, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. Huge Cincinnati Bengals fan. Moved over here in 91 and haven't looked back. So, as of February, like I said, 23 years, it'll be exactly half of my life, because I'll be 46.
Wow.
That's one more year, and I'll be here longer than I was in the States.
Oh, that is amazing. That's actually a little bit surreal.
Yeah, it is.
Wow. Okay, so this week we're talking about things that you like and things that you don't like about living in Japan, since you've been there for so long. And since I am generally a positive person, I thought we'd kick off things by starting off with things that you do not like about living in Japan, so we can leave on a high note. So what's something that you don't like about living in Japan?
I don't like the way people drive here.
No. Okay, so what do you mean by people driving?
I don't like their manners. But with that said, I'm going to kind of preempt this a little bit with, I've been to Korea and I see how they drive, and over here is like heaven. But with that said, over here, like the Japanese have in their life, they are so in the group, so to speak, right? The group mentality, that when they get into their own private space, they tend to let loose. And when they're in a car, they're on their own. They won't stop for you to let you in. They'll actually block you so you can't get in.
But is that any different than saying driving Los Angeles, New York, or any other crowded city in the United States?
Well, I'm from Cincinnati, so I've never experienced that.
But Cincinnati's not a small town.
It is compared to the bigger cities.
Okay.
It's still, Midwest. Only about 500,000 people in Cincinnati.
Oh, really? That's small? Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's small, sure. Probably about 700,000, I would imagine.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I'm not, and I lived in northern Kentucky actually.
Okay.
So I'm not accustomed to rudeness from drivers. One time when we were home, my wife had said to me she was so surprised at how friendly people were behind them. They'd stop and wave you in and things like that. So yeah, that's one thing that drives me crazy here. I can't stand the way their manners with their driving.
Okay, so that's one thing.
Yeah, they cut in on you, when just hardly any space, and they'll just wedge a truck in where they shouldn't.
Now, if you come up to a stoplight, do people get bumper to bumper, or is there a little buffer room in between cars?
Yeah, they tend to get bumper to bumper. Yeah.
Ooh, I always get nervous about that.
Yeah, I don't like that either. And the thing is, you'll be coming out of a convenience store parking lot, for example.
Okay.
And there's a red light maybe 50 meters down the road, and the cars start piling up, right?
Mm-hmm.
They start lining up, and you want to pull out, and what somebody will do is they will actually pull in front of you so you can't get out, and they'll get up on the bumper of the other car, and then the car behind them will do the same thing to that car, and when the light changes and they start to move, they all just kind of move together, and it's if you had a gun, you'd shoot somebody.
And that would never be good.
Surely, of course.
Yeah, you just get frustrated. All right, so what's something else that you don't like about living in Japan?
Nosy neighbors.
No, ooh, okay, nosy neighbors. Didn't expect that.
Yeah, especially where I live, we're kind of in a rural area,
mm-hmm.
and the neighborhood's kind of quiet, and I've got rice fields across the street from my house. So, this is kind of an old neighborhood. There are a lot of older people, and everybody has to know everything that's going on.
Okay.
Yeah, and the old ladies sit in the corner. They actually stand at the corner every morning, harping back and forth with each other and always in on everybody's business.
Is there a lot of like local gossiping? Do they share the information or just have to get involved?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, they gossip.
We get a lot of that here in Dongtan in Korea. A lot of the ajumas, the older women, always share stories comparing information about kids and information about teachers and just sharing all the gossip around. So,
right.
I'm trying to think if we had anything like that in the United States, and there were certainly cliques that were, of that nature as well.
Yeah, I've heard I've talked with some of these ladies before, and I've heard stories of other neighbors, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously, when I'm not around, they're speaking about us. Yeah. You just never know what it is, and and like I said, they're always in your business. Oh, you'll be sitting out on the porch, and somebody will walk by and they'll stop and give you 50 questions, get caught up on everything.
Okay.
So, as you know, I've got this bad back now, right?
Right.
And I'm kind of walking around with a hiking stick just for a little support. And I've already had neighbors coming up to me. What's happened? Did you injure yourself? And it's just, could you just leave me alone?
Well, but maybe okay. On the positive side, maybe they are genuinely concerned.
Oh, sure. I mean, obviously, I didn't brush them off or anything. I thought, I hurt my back, blah, blah. But I know they're going to
be spreading it around.
I'm sure it's around the entire neighborhood now that, why is the big guy on a cane, So,
Gotcha. All right.
I'm never rude with them, never.
Yeah. You are one of the friendliest people I have ever met, I will say that.
Thank you.
Because I have met you twice now in person.
Yes, you have.
Yes. All right, something else you don't like about living in Japan?
Well, it kind of falls back into the other two, just your public image and your private image. I don't like to separate those two. I try to stay true to myself and be who I am.
Okay.
24/7, 365. Yeah. 366 in a leap year.
There you go. 366. All right, so moving on to better topics. Things that you do like about living in Japan.
I love the living condition. I don't think I could live in like Tokyo or Nagoya or Osaka, one of the big cities. But like I said before, here is a rather rural area, and it's reminiscent of where I come from.
Okay. So population-wise, how big is where you are?
It's about like Shizuoka City's about like Cincinnati, about
okay, so 500,000, 750,000.
A little over 500,000. We're about 40 minutes outside the city. The little city we live in, there's about 120,000.
Okay.
And which is rural for Japan.
That's downright cozy.
Yeah, it's really nice here. I love it.
Okay.
So that's it's like being back home.
Now,
things are slowed down, and like I said, the old lady's asking the questions. On the opposite side of my gripe from before, it's nice that you can stop and talk with the neighbors.
Yeah, because even here, everyone's in apartment buildings, and we don't have that sense of community that you would have in a more rural area, and that is something that I miss.
Sure.
What else do you like about living in Japan?
Well, I went on about their driving manners, but their public manners. Japanese people are so kind. You hear so many stories of racism and all this. I don't get that feeling over here. Japanese people are very, very polite. They'll go out of their way to help you. If I can give you a real quick story, my mom was visiting, and we dropped her when they were going back. We dropped them at Shizuoka Station. Because Narita's like 5 hours from here. Okay. So we dropped them at Shizuoka Station. They got the train up to Tokyo, and when they got to Tokyo, they didn't know where to go for the Narita Express. Okay. It goes to the airport. So a businessman stopped and asked him, "Are you okay?" And they said, "Oh, we're trying to get to the airport." He took them to the train, got on the train with them, took the hour ride out to the airport, took them to the desk where they needed to go, and then he left them and came back to Tokyo.
That's amazing. And if you don't know, if you've never traveled in Tokyo, depending on where you catch the train out to the airport, it can be as much as, say, 3,000 yen, so about $30 to ride out there. So that, I mean, to do that both ways, that's, $60, and that's incredibly kind.
Yeah, and you hear stories like that all the time. People, walking way out of their way, taking people places. It's just, yeah. So Japanese manners, love it.
That is cool. All right.
Love them.
What is something else?
Cleanliness, streets.
Yeah.
You were here. You know how it is.
Yeah, I was very, very clean.
Yeah, I mean, you see the occasional cigarette butt here and there, but at the same time, and I've even seen this in the big cities like in Tokyo and Nagoya, you'll see some of the neighborhood old ladies out in the morning picking up cigarette butts and any kind of trashy people dropped on the ground. And these aren't people that are being paid to do this. They're just keeping their neighborhood clean. Yeah. So you can go up to the train station and stand on the platform, and there's no trash laying around. It's nice and neat. Public restrooms, gorgeous.
That they are. I'll vouch for that.
Yeah, even gas stations. You can go to a restroom at a gas station. It's pristine. It's not like what we're used to.
Yeah, I've been in some very shady restrooms back in the United States. Downright, downright disgusting.
Didn't think I'd survive.
No, so the old like, do not go in there at all.
That's right. There once was a man from Nantucket, right?
All right. What else is on the positive list from Japan for you?
Food.
Oh, food. Okay. Tell me about your culinary adventures, sir.
Yes, Steve, you've met me. I'm a rather large fellow. I enjoy eating. Japanese food. Now, aside from sushi, I can't. It's not that I don't like fish. It's just I don't like
raw
uncooked fish.
Okay.
And it's not even the taste; it's the texture that I don't like.
Okay.
So I usually stay away from sushi and sashimi, but they've got a lot of great stuff here. They do with meats and the sauces that they use, and the way they pickle things. Oh, it's just love it.
So if someone who has never tried a Japanese dish,
sure,
what would you recommend? What is? Let me just say it. What is one of your favorite Japanese?
Okay,
dishes?
Well, if I don't want to come off too white trash here, but tonkatsu curry is really good. Tonkatsu is a deep fried pork cutlet.
So donkatsu in Korea as well. So yeah, lightly breaded, very crispy on the outside, sliced. Now I do like the curry version, but I love cheese, so I love when they put the cheese around the pork cutlet, or I usually get the chicken cast here, so I usually have the chicken breast inside, smothered in delicious cheese.
And then deep fried. Yeah, Steve, I can hear my arteries closing as we speak.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, and I love it with Japanese curry and rice. I would say that's probably my favorite. That's my go-to.
Okay, that's excellent choice. Excellent choice. I can't fault you for that. That is fantastic. Anything else on your list of things you've enjoyed while living in Japan?
Freedoms.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
So,
as an American, you hear, America, land of the free. Well, here in Japan, I can go outside. I can walk down the street drinking a beer. There are machines that sell beer on the street.
That is true. I've purchased some.
Just a lot of we were in school the other day, and the kids were running around shooting each other with their finger guns, right? And Kurt and I were just like, that wouldn't fly in the States anymore. The kids
anymore. Yeah.
Labeled as terrorists and pulled out of school and suspended, whatever. I like that I can do what I want to do here.
Well, I mean, I agree with you there. I mean, I look at what's happened in the United States with, safety regulations and political correctness and what you can and cannot do. I mean, you and I grew up around the same time, and when I was going to elementary school, we played dodgeball, butts up, and all these games where you took balls and hurled them at other people. And that was just good, clean fun. And I even remember being praised by a teacher for playing, a game like that instead of roughhousing and, hitting each other during recess time, because we were having an organized game. Yet, here in the United States, they're trying to get rid of dodgeball and all these other games where you can't throw balls because, God forbid, someone on the off chance gets hurt, and the school's so afraid about being litigated against that they just want to get rid of all the fun things together.
Yeah. It's a litigious society over there.
Yeah. And, growing up in the 70s, we all had open container laws, at least in Texas.
Right. The thing that I've noticed here is that people police themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's a sense of responsibility.
I'm sorry. I should say the group
polices themselves.
Polices the individual. If I was to do something screwy around the neighborhood, they would blacklist me.
Yeah.
And you don't want that, And I see it in school. Like I've actually been in situations where I've had a problem student. And I'll say to some of the other students, get him in line, and they take care of it.
Yeah.
It's not something that I don't need to go to their teachers. I don't need to go to their parents. The kids will take care of it amongst themselves. Yeah. And the neighborhoods do too, and just society in general. So I like that.
Well, I mean, like I said, it comes down to, like you said, the group policing the individual and keeping things in line. And also, it just, I look at where the United States is now and to where it used to be back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And it's just changed because the courts have been so open to litigation and letting everything fly.
Yeah, it's day and night, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually a shame. Anything else on your list before we cut out for the day?
No, I think that's about it. You said 5 and 3, so that's what I prepared.
Cool. All right. Well, everyone, Jim is a fantastic individual. He talks about life in Japan. If you want to follow his Twitter or his YouTube channel, you can click on over to QiRanger.com. The links to both of those will be in the show notes. Jim, thank you for joining me this week on the podcast.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be here.
All right, I'll be back.
And don't forget to link up Things That Suck.
Oh, yes, Things That Suck. Is it coming back?
Yes, it will be. It will be.
All right, Things That Suck is about... Oh, go ahead and plug Things That Suck.
Okay, Things That Suck is a channel dedicated to videos that... things that people experience in their everyday lives that just suck. And I try to do it in a comedic way. The videos are usually about a minute long. They're done Mr. Bean style with no speaking other than the ending. That sucks. So yeah, check it out. Things That Suck with a Z.
And when is it coming back, do you think?
We may get her going after New Year's.
All right, after New Year's. So in 2014, Things That Suck will be joining us on the YouTubes once more. All right, I'll be back in just a second. Well, that will do it for this week's episode of the podcast. Thank you so much once more for joining me this week. As always, you can find all the show notes by visiting QiRanger.com. The link is in the description box, or you can click the annotation. Now, to keep up with everything that I do, please follow my social media links. Those can be found also in the description box or over on QiRanger.com. I also would love to hear your feedback about the podcast. You can email me at podcast@QiRanger.com to share with me your thoughts about this show. Now, that'll be it for this week. So until next time, remember to be true to yourself and always be awesome. The QiRanger Podcast is written and produced by Steve Miller and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Morning Blue was written and performed by Josh Woodward.